Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. As we know, we just got the huge Season 2 update for Warzone and Cold War, which not only was a big update physically, but it also changed a ton in-game, ranging from map changes to new content with the Battle Pass. We, of course, got some new weapons, so it was a pretty big update, all things considered. But one thing in specific that changed with the Season 2 patch was the Cold War attachments. The patch notes actually claim that the Cold War attachments now function accurately to what they say on the menu. We all know previously it said they did one thing, a lot of them did a different thing. Now they say that they're accurate, which means that a lot of the Cold War weapons just got a lot worse and some got a lot better. So today we're going over the Cold War attachment updates and basically just what to look out for when making loadouts. As always, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. Let's aim for 3,500 likes today. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, I am always covering the latest news, intel, updates, and everything else going on in COD, so feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. So quick update before we get into everything today. You are going to hear me talk about the agency suppressor and whatnot in this video, as it had some major issues with it upon the launch of Season 2. However, since I recorded this, Raven ended up tweeting out saying that they are going to return the agency, the GRU, and the RAP suppressors to their original states pre-Season 2 in their next hotfix. They don't actually say when the next hotfix is going to be though. Could be as this video is going up, could be later on this weekend. But yeah, just a heads up, while the agency was broken and has its own discussion in this video, just know it's either going to be fixed soon or has been fixed, depending on when you're watching this video. Alright, so if we go ahead and go on into the weapons here, we can start with some of the rifles, I guess, and then we'll go ahead and break down some of the other weapons too, because it's different between certain categories. It's sort of that situation again where sometimes things work a certain way, sometimes they don't, and it's kind of a case-by-case scenario. But let's look at the FFAR here. Of course, this was a super popular meta weapon all throughout Season 1. I still think it's going to be pretty good because technically it wasn't actually nerfed in any way outside of the attachments being different. The first thing here, though, the big deal, is the agency suppressor. As we know, this is something that pretty much every single player ran on every single weapon in Cold War, or every single Cold War weapon, rather, within Season 1, because this was essentially a one-to-one copy of the monolithic suppressor. However, it also ended up reducing your vertical recoil a tad bit as well, which was a nice little hidden bonus. Now you can see, though, under the pros, it obviously adds that sound suppression, so you're not going to show up on the minimap. It also adds in that vertical recoil control, so that's no longer going to be a hidden pro. However, underneath the cons, it reduces the effective damage range and it reduces the bullet velocity, which is the exact opposite of what the monolithic suppressor does. It increases the range. That's how the agency suppressor and the GRU suppressor were supposed to work. That's why they changed them in the middle of Season 1, if you guys remember that. So basically, they went ahead and reverted the whole agency suppressor change and the GRU suppressor change to now make them kind of useless. You never want to really end up decreasing your range or your bullet velocity here in Warzone, because that's going to severely limit your options in any given gunfight. It's going to force you to play close and close medium range fights pretty much exclusively with that weapon if you want to deal any kind of significant damage. So the fact that this is now reverted makes the agency suppressor almost useless in quite a few scenarios, whereas some of these other muzzles now actually aren't too bad. The SOCOM Eliminator obviously has a lot of cons there. It hurts your ADS firing move speed, so your strafing speed there, your shooting move speed, your horizontal recoil, while actually increasing your vertical recoil. So that's something you could use if you wanted some better vertical recoil control, although I think there's some better options, as we'll see. The infantry compensator here just ends up increasing your vertical recoil control, hurts your horizontal, nothing too crazy on that one. Absolutely avoid the suppressor. There's no reason to use this. You stay off the minimap, but you kill your range and your velocity. Big no-no when it comes to attachments here. The flash guard is actually very good now. This is one of the better muzzle attachments, I would say, because it doesn't have any listed cons. Of course, there could always be some secret stuff that maybe we'll find out in a few days' time that you wouldn't necessarily notice off the rip, but it actually increases your vertical recoil control and your aiming stability. So that's going to be a pretty impactful attachment on certain weapons, especially ones that you're using in those medium and longer range fights. Then the muzzle brake just increases that vertical recoil control. Personally, I don't see why you wouldn't use the flash guard if you were going to use the muzzle brake. It's just better in every way and doesn't have any cons that we know of. So definitely some very, very big changes to the muzzle category here. Then when it comes to the barrels, the task force description, I don't believe ends up changing. Maybe the strafe speed is new. I can't remember if that was there before or not. However, the cons here are what should now be in effect. The task force barrel now should actually end up decreasing your control across the board. Vertical and horizontal should be a lot worse when using the task force barrels. So if you want to keep using this for that better range and better velocity, especially on something like the FFAR, where in the past it's been the best barrel when paired with like the bruiser grip, then it's going to end up actually feeling a lot different than before because you're going to have to compensate for even more recoil. At the same time, you've got things like the takedown barrel, which now say they increase velocity and strafe speed, no cons, so that could actually be pretty viable. You've got the Ranger barrel. I believe this does the same thing as it did before, increases that velocity, decreases the movement speed. Reinforced heavy ends up hurting your mobility in general just a bit, but it does actually increase the range and the velocity. And for those pros there, I would say this is definitely like a meta barrel to use right now. The Lancer barrel ends up just increasing your range in general, and the Ultralight does the same. However, it does actually end up hurting your move speed. Kind of weird that the Ultralight barrel hurts your movement speed. It's kind of backwards, but hey, it is what it is. Overall though, if all these barrels actually do what they say they do, which they should going off of the patch notes, and basically what has been tested so far, it seems like this stuff is pretty much accurate, except for in a handful of cases, which we'll break down. You really just want to be looking for those barrels that are increasing the range and the velocity with just minimal cons. When it comes to the lasers, this is a category that I don't really see being super useful. It can help in some situations, but it's not anything as impactful as the MW laser category, where we have the TAC laser and the 5 milliwatt laser, which are both really, really good. But the steady aim laser is now visible to enemies, so that's kind of a drawback. The mounted flashlight also visible. I believe actually all of these are visible to enemies now, so whenever you're using a Cold War laser, the enemies can actually see that. Some of these do end up helping though. This increases mobility, this increases hip fire accuracy. I wish the 5 milliwatt laser for Cold War worked like the Modern Warfare one. It'd be a lot more useful if that was a thing. This one actually apparently decreases aim down sight time, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, when it comes to the optics, I don't think anything changed here. I know JGod mentioned that even on the snipers, things like the 4x scope and even the 20x scope still don't have glint. I'm not sure if that's intended. I can't imagine it is, because it gives those Cold War snipers a significant advantage over some of the Modern Warfare ones. But these obviously don't really change your stats in any specific way, in any major way, right? So I don't think anything really changed here. For the stocks, I think these are just going to work more accurately now to what they did before. I don't think any of the actual pros and cons here changed all that much. To me, the combat stock still seems to be the most viable on the FFAR, for instance. Raider stock though is also great on some SMGs and plenty of other Cold War weapons as well. Just depends if you want that really fast strafing speed when you're ADS, or if you just want that medium strafing speed with some good mobility elsewhere as well. Then we get to the grips, and there were some very big changes here. Raven actually specifically mentioned the Bruiser grip in the patch notes, is saying now it 100% increases movement speed and hip fire accuracy. So theoretically, it should no longer increase your recoil control whatsoever. They didn't actually mention that it did that. They kind of just ignored that it wasn't actually doing the melee quickness before. It was increasing your recoil, of course, as we all know. But with that change now, the Field Agent grip and I think the Spetsnaz grip on some of the other weapons, because it changes. Basically, whatever grip increases your horizontal and vertical control is going to be the best one to use in the vast majority of cases. Unfortunately, it does hurt your mobility a bit, but those are things you can make up for in other categories, so you can sort of balance that out. But overall, I definitely think Field Agent is going to be the wave on the vast majority of Cold War weapons. For the ammunition, really all this update does for me is make it so that the fast mags are actually usable now. It was weird because in some cases the fast mag worked like it should, and in other cases, like on the MP5, the fast mag was actually slower than some of the other mags. But that said, you do have to keep in mind the fast mags do actually hurt your ADS time compared to things that aren't the fast mags. Obviously, just like a standard extended mag doesn't really hurt your aim down sight time, it just gives you that extra ammo, and I'll use that occasionally on certain weapons. That's kind of a case-by-case scenario though. But as you get further on into the actual ammo attachments, the bigger the mag, chances are the slower it's going to be on your weapon, either for movement speed and or ADS time. Then for rear grips, this is a situation where I'm actually very interested to see how impactful these are going to be now, because these were essentially obsolete before. They didn't work whatsoever. JGod proved that the grips and the wraps don't really do anything for your weapons in the past. Now though, according to the patch notes at least, these should actually be really, really useful for your mobility. You can see that these don't really have a ton of cons unless you get to the Jason Bourne elastic wrap, where you lose your ADS firing move speed, some firing movement speed, and your sprint to fire time, which is somewhat unfortunate. I do like the fact though that they changed that this no longer increases your ability to drop shot, because that was a universal mechanic in this game anyways. So this is probably going to be accurate now. The question is just how impactful the sprint to fire time increases, the ADS time increases are going to be here. And I say that because you can probably end up getting a decent amount of mobility off of some other attachments, specifically the stocks. And I feel like in the past, when none of us were using any of these rear grips, a lot of the Cold War weapons still felt very mobile and very fast. Like I could run around with a really fast MAC-10 or an FFAR without using a rear grip, because I had a stock on there that was pretty much making up for that lost mobility. So I do see this area being a lot more viable, but not necessarily necessary, I guess you could say, on a lot of weapons, just because they don't add in a ton. Maybe the drop shot wrap here is on a few weapons because it doesn't really have any cons, and it does help that ADS time. The speed wrap does the same thing. Again, though, this is kind of a situation like the muzzle brake, where this one, the drop shot wrap, I should say, has an extra pro with the flinch resistance compared to just the speed wrap, which doesn't have that. The speed wrap gives you a little bit more mobility according to those stat bars, but in the past, those haven't been super accurate. But I don't see why you would use just the speed tape if this one does the same plus more without any cons, you know? Now, all of that said, there is one other difference here that we know of. There could be many other secret changes here, and I'm sure we're gonna find out more in the coming days. And if that's the case, you guys already know I'm gonna be covering that stuff as it comes out. But on the SMGs, the agency suppressor, the Groove suppressor, apparently doesn't have that same revert, that same nerf that the agency suppressor has on a lot of the rifles, the tac rifles, the snipers on the wrap suppressor. That doesn't work like it should anymore. But it has been said on the Mac 10, for instance, the agency suppressor is still viable. You still want to use this here because it doesn't actually decrease that range or that velocity. It's still going to be one of the better options here. In the past, though, I was using like the muzzle brake. Now I can see myself using the flash guard. This isn't a super necessary attachment, and I noticed that actually in the past when I was using the flash guard, the weapon felt a lot faster. So while agency is still probably going to be my go-to here, this is by no means necessary, especially right now when it's so confusing. Does it work? Does it not work? Hopefully in the future this gets clarified. I think Raven is probably going to fix this because obviously this update in general, with how they reverted specifically the agency suppressor on so many weapons, when you go in and you look at the assault rifles, all these now become a whole lot worse than all of these. We have the monolithic suppressor on the M13, the Kilo, the Grau, the AN94. That increased range, that increased velocity is going to be a huge bonus to have. It's going to make a lot of these Cold War weapons really not usable in those longer range fights. Up close, medium range, sure, but the problem that we had with the Cold War weapons initially was that they were so dedicated for those close and medium range fights, especially things like the rifles. You just didn't have any range with them. That's why it sort of felt like the Modern Warfare weapons were still pretty dominant, with the exception of things like, of course, the FFAR, for instance. Like I said, in the coming days, as we get more information on the attachments, I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. Of course, we're going to be breaking down all the best loadouts for Season 2 and the best setups for Season 2, including some Cold War weapons, so be on the lookout for that stuff. But as of right now, hopefully this video helped you out a bit when it comes to what you should be looking out for when you're making a loadout with Cold War weapons, what to stay away from, what to maybe lean towards, and what to pay attention to as you're building your setups. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, or if you just found it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new here and you want to stay up to date with pretty much everything going on in COD, from news to intel to updates and everything else in between, feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. That way you'll always know whenever I upload a new video. As always, if you want to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code WhosImmortal for a discount on all Scuff, G Fuel, and Control Freak products. The links for all those can be found down in the description below. But once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.